This is a Jeanneau Leader 8, and it's a boat which I am particularly interested to have a look at because it's basically a newer version of my Jeanneau Leader 805. So mine's a 2006 boat, this is a 2013, this particular example, and is essentially exactly the same, and yet it's completely different. So I'm going to wander around this one, show you what it's all about, but also explain to you what's different on this one compared to my boat, because fundamentally the layout and everything else is identical, but they've just brought it really up to date. So we're going to step on the back here, and in fact that's the first thing I can mention is this bathing platform, because it's a little bit longer than it is on my boat, so there's a bit more space on there, and they've got quite a neat integration of the ladder that's underneath here. But actually the system is exactly the same as mine. Mine has a grating in the middle, you lift the grating up and it's underneath there. Let's head on a bit further. I think we'll take a walk around the outside first of all, and then we'll come and look at the inside. So just like on my boat, the steps up here take you onto the side deck, and it has asymmetric side decks. What that means is the side deck on this side is slightly wider than the other side, so you've got a really nice walkway on one side, but you don't lose too much cockpit space, because of course the wider you make this, the narrower you make the cockpit, so that's quite a good compromise. Up here on the front, again, it's all very similar, but with a few detailed changes. So for example, this is a little bit different. You've got an exposed anchor winch on this one, and then your chain locker is there with the winch control, and the colour is different, whereas mine's cream, this one is white, a little bit more modern, and the windscreen is different as well, that's a little bit more modern. But one thing that's really changed is the fact that on this one they fitted a radar arch, so you've got this GRP goalpost that goes up and round, and that makes a really good place to hang your canopies from. So it still has the framework, you can see it here, but it gives a very solid fitting for that, and somewhere for things like, well, a radar obviously if you wanted one, but also nav light that's folded down at the moment, and the that's the antenna for the TV, so you can put things on there, and there's a handle here as well as you walk around, which is a very useful thing as you come into the cockpit to grab hold of. Now here again it's exactly the same, except that mine is curved all the way around and this one's much squarer, and that actually is quite nice because it means that you can get yourself into the corner a little bit more, which is rather pleasant. And against that I think there's possibly very slightly less seating as a result, but very little in it indeed. That seat exactly the same as my boat, except they've slid it back slightly, and that's left space for a little sink on the outside. And then this helm again exactly the same, but much more modern. And what they've done here is they've tiered this, and that means that your chart plotter can now be flush mounted directly into the dash, whereas on mine it sits on a bracket up here. Now while we're in this area, I'll show you the engine as well. This is another area which I think is quite clever. On mine, to get to the engine compartment, you need to remove this cushion, you need to remove these cushions, slot them all out of the way, and then you can lift it up. What they've done with this is they've cut it round the inside of this, so that as you lift this, this cushion goes up with it. So you don't actually need to move any cushions at all, which is quite nice. This is the same, you've got this big storage area here at the front, and as we drop down, this particular boat has got a petrol engine, mine's a diesel. This one has got a Volvo Penta GXI 320 V8, so that is a 320 horsepower engine. I don't know the performance, but it ought to be faster than mine. Mine will do about 32, 33 knots. I'm guessing this is 35, 36 knots. I don't know for sure. But a very similar engine compartment in terms of the space and everything else. So again, it's very, very similar, but it's a refinement. The engine, of course, is owner specification, so you will find some of these with diesel engines in. You'll also find some like mine with petrol engines in. So it's not actually a fundamental change, it's just what the owner has selected in terms of the engine choice. Okay, let's put that back down. Let's head on inside, because again, the changes keep coming. The fundamental layout of these is very good. This is exactly the same as mine, but a few slight differences. So the woodwork is a bit more modern. Mine's a dark cherry. This was a rather lighter matte finish, whereas mine's a bit more gloss finish. This is exactly the same. Sink is exactly the same. Fridge underneath, exactly the same. But it's a bit more modern in things like the headlinings and that kind of stuff. And they've improved the lighting a little bit, so you've got more lights in here. And also, they've actually put, I don't know whether you've seen the video of mine, but I've put LED lights in behind the pelmets along here. On this one they fitted them as standard, and they're up and behind here. Not colour changing though, which mine are. And this whole area is just a little bit more squared off. It's just making it look a little bit more contemporary. Now that will convert also to a double bed. So if you want to sleep there, you can do. Just take the table leg out. It's a shorter leg. Cushions go on it. And that makes a big double. But it's not the only sleeping area on the boat. I'll come to that in a moment. But as we're at this area, there's a hanging locker just here. Again, exactly the same as mine, except they move the battery switches inside, so that's a bit more convenient. They're in the cockpit on my boat. And behind that is the heads. Again, very similar, but they've changed this area here. Mine's got a sink there the same, but that's just a bit more modern. And again, there's a shower that pulls out from here, and that drains, so it makes like a wet room. And you can put your shower onto this little hook just here. Another thing I'll just mention is in this headlining, they've actually put a blind up in there like that. That's a nice touch. Mine has a blind, but you just clip it onto poppers, so that's a little bit more sophisticated. And in fact, you can pull it the other way like that. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but that's basically a fly screen now. Or you can slide it and have it completely open, of course. Okay, so what else have we got in here? This is quite nice. They've put a big window, you can see it there, underneath there, so that throws a lot more light into this area, where you can put this privacy screen on as we've got at the moment. And then this is the mid cabin. Again, exactly the same as mine, except it's a bit more modern. They've made this seat larger. Mine's just a small seat that curves around here. This is a bit longer. Cupboard is in exactly the same place, but now goes right up to the ceiling. The window above it is much larger, and again, you've got one of these natty blinds like that, which is clever. Like so. And then the bed itself, well, that's a double bed that runs right across, exactly the same. And those there are the infill cushions that go on the table to make that into a double bed. And that is the cockpit table there, so that goes onto a little table leg out in the cockpit, and you've got dining around the table out there if you want it. So that's about it, really. I think they've done a really nice job on this. As I say, it's kept all the things I like about my boat, but it's just updated it a bit and made it a little bit more convenient. And I think it works very well indeed. This one's for sale with One Marine down in Torquay, so if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description and you can take a look. Anyway, thanks for watching that one. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we will look forward to catching you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.